Awesome. I appreciate it.
And as you heard, we're recording starting now. So take it away whenever you're ready. Thank you so much.
So I'm Diana Reyna. I am the Lieutenant Governor candidate running with Tom Suozzi, the governor candidate for New York State. It's a pleasure to be here with you all. My background, just a little bit about myself. I am a mother of two teenage boys, a 14-year-old and a 16-year-old, married to a lieutenant with the New York City Police Department, who's been in for 25 years. Looking forward to what is soon to be a retirement. I served in the city council in 2001 to 2013. I was a district leader, so congratulations to the district leader who's here with us today, and the opportunities to be able to have started my career as an intern in 1995, serving my community of Williamsburg, where I grew up, in Bushwick. The opportunity to be able to continue that career has led what would be an amazing journey in public service. I was elected to the district leader position in 2000, and soon to follow what would be the council for 12 years. I served what would be 3 terms. I later entered what would be the opportunity to serve in the Eric Adams administration as the Deputy Brooklyn Borough President for 4 years. And since then, I have built what is a consulting business. I left 4 years ago to be able to redirect my attention to my family. My father had passed away 5 years ago, and I needed to take care of my mother's affairs. I have said all of that just to give you a little bit of background. I grew up in Williamsburg, Los Ures. I live in Brooklyn, in Bushwick. My opportunity to engage back into the arena as far as politics is concerned is very near and dear to me. I missed public service. Tom Suozzi had approached and was eager to work with someone that mirrored what would be the same values. I am very much a lifelong Democrat who has worked for my community, rebuilding community. I grew up in Los Ures, Williamsburg, not the Los Ures people remember today. It's the Williamsburg of what is the documentary Living Los Ures. It was a time in the 70s and 80s that were very tough. And I have prided myself in making sure that standing on the shoulders of many giants from our community, that we were able to work together to rebuild our community. We have had a fortunate opportunity to be able to run as a ticket on the gubernatorial race. I've served what would be with distinction as a proven leader in my community, to be able to work on matters such as affordable housing, championing the industrial business zone areas, making sure that we work on improving our education system. These are issues that are very important to us. But today, the number one issue, especially hearing from community, is crime. The public safety is at the top of our priority list. We're talking about bail reform fixes that we need to focus our attention on, being able to give the dangerousness clause back into the bail reform so that our judges can approach what is every individual before them with a much more comprehensive outlook. We believe in making sure that this campaign focuses on addressing public safety, being able to introduce what would be preventative services as well as intervening when it's appropriate, being able to provide what is a more affordable state of New York. And I'm sure many of us have seen, the pressures of inflation, utility costs rising, property taxes rising. We are seeing more seniors who are rich and income poor and protecting their assets. These are issues of affordability. Just last year alone, we lost 300,000 people in New York State. And we've seen a steady decline of our congressional seats. It's because people are running away from New York, not into New York at the same pace. And so we want to be able to take these issues in addition to what is public safety and affordable New York State, making sure that not to allow for what is another decade of failing schools. I know what it's like to grow up in a neighborhood where you have schools that are underperforming, not for 2 years, 3 years, we're talking about decades, half a century of underperformance. So making sure that we are addressing what are these particular school districts that are in need of resources, coordinated care of services into the schools so that the students have a fighting chance to achieve, raising the standards, right? Aligning the content of our education curriculum with what is expected so that they have a successful chance at a career. These are all very key issues, not the only issues, but those are the three that we are definitely prioritizing on the campaign trail. And lastly, just wanted to make sure that we have a campaign that speaks to the people. We have engaged what are many voters via town hall meetings. We have one tonight. Wish you could join us. I know that you have a busy evening today, but we are definitely engaging with people. And this is a campaign that is for the people, by the people, making sure that they have an opportunity to be able to tell us what's important to them. I spent my career hosting what would be hundreds of monthly meetings with my community. I represented Williamsburg, Bushwick, and Ridgewood, Queens. So understanding, right, that 5-borough district doesn't come easy, cutting across boroughs, but at every turn, I was very dedicated to making sure that no part of my community was marginalized. I think that is also true today as I embark in this lieutenant governor race, making sure that the voters have an opportunity to share their stories, their concerns as we continue to problem solve. I know that Allison has raised her hand, but I'll
I was going to say, let's open it up to some questions. Thank you for that thorough introduction. And now we'll move on to the question and answer part of this. Allison, you'll be first down the stack. If anyone else has any questions, please feel free to use the raise hand feature or you can type them in the chat. Yes, so I see Allison and then Andrea and Anthony. Go ahead, please, Allison.
Good evening. Thank you so much for being with us. I was wondering if you could clarify your position to Governor Hochul's proposed rollbacks of the bail reform.
I want to be clear. Governor Hochul sent out what would be a memo. There hasn't been any action, right? So part of what I want to make sure is that people understand this immediate need to address public safety is about taking action, not sending out a memo. And so that is the distinction. We have an opportunity right now to be able to address this through the legislature with the governor to be able to take this particular clause that's very specific, the dangerousness clause, and making sure that we work with our judicial, law representatives to be able to understand that we're giving them the resources so that it's not a catch and release system. This is 20% of the crime being committed is being committed by the same people. And we're talking about the top 7 index crimes, right? This is about a quality of life issue. When you separate what would be the 20% that are committing the crimes, now you have the rest of the crime that we're facing that our quality of life matters, right? Those are not even on the radar. So this is a very specific time and action that we have to take.
Thank you. Andrea Gordillo, co-president, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Diana, for coming. I have a couple of questions. My first one is, I'm intrigued by your background. I'm wondering maybe you can tell us a little bit about what it is. And then my other question is maybe a big question, but maybe in broad strokes you could answer it, which is about, as Lieutenant Governor, what you would do to address the crisis in public housing.
So the first answer to your question is, this is the BQE in the south side of Williamsburg. And this was my last commissioned study for my district. I had commissioned 3 different studies throughout my career, and this being the last to deck over the BQE. This was commissioned back in 2009, and it was published in 2010. And what you see here is an opportunity to right a wrong with a right. Robert Moses divided community, and this allows for our community of Los Sures Williamsburg to reconnect. This allows what would be a open space acreage so that our asset of open space increases in an area, in a district that is 3rd lowest in open space. So we look forward to the day that we can actually get this accomplished. This is a poor neighborhood with an immigrant neighborhood surrounded by what would be a growing wealth population, and the opportunities to be able to have social benefit projects like this are becoming more difficult in our community. And then the second, as far as the public housing, I was chair of when I had reinstituted what was the subcommittee at the time in 2002, Committee on Public Housing. I had 5 public housing developments in my district when I was a council member. And so I had a vested interest to making sure that we were addressing a lot of issues in public housing. The opportunity to be able to look at the creation of a safety net for public housing, addressing what are long overdue repairs. These are opportunities for us to be creative. Just recently, the air rights in Gowanus houses, right, is an example of how we can be able to include public housing in an opportunity of creating a fund. But that's just one of many ideas that have not been explored. Public housing is our greatest asset to affordable housing right now. And the opportunity to be able to redesign and work with our elected officials that represent public housing. You have communities that are oversaturated with public housing. And for one community to have to deal with what is all of a good portion of the public housing stock is not fair, because then those are the communities that suffer the most, that bear the grunt of what would be a working poor community that then does not have the resources invested into their communities. We see the food deserts in all of these communities, and it's tied to income levels, right? A food Trader Joe's isn't going into these communities when they see public housing. We need to make sure that public housing is prioritized and balanced, right? So Michalama housing was a program of affordable housing that we haven't seen since the 70s. Battery Park has a affordable housing fund that we can tap into to put into the public housing development. We have probably what would be a good 30% of families that earn and pay what is the height ceilings of rent in public housing that would prefer to be homeowners. How are we engaging in making sure that those families have opportunities to remain in the city of New York, to allow for affordable homeownership opportunities that the city doesn't necessarily prioritize, so that those are the units then that become available for families in need. These are, it's a very complex issue that's going to take more than one answer.
Absolutely. Thank you for opening the discussion on it. Anthony Feliciano, you had a question?
Yes. Hi, Diana. Anthony Feliciano, State Committee. I have two questions. First question is for you is, you did talk about bail reform, but if you were Lieutenant Governor, what would be some of the areas that you believe should do around police reforms? What are you thinking if you were in that role?
Setting aside what is bail reform with police reform, right? The opportunities I come from a neighborhood where we had a lot of hundreds of meetings with what was the commanding officers of our precincts. One of the things that assisted us was working hand in hand with community. The opportunity to be able to meet with our commanding officer on a monthly basis, understand who your patrol officers were. Our neighborhood were calling for more police presence. The opportunity to be able to engage in community forums and meetings, to be able to understand what's happening on a block by block basis. Programs like FTAP, right? Where today you don't find what are people talking about FTAP. FTAP is a great resource that allows for, every resident in a building to sign off on an affidavit, to be able to engage what is police presence by coming and visiting their building, being able to patrol the building if there's a trespasser, that the actual tenants feel safe if they're hanging around in the lobby and don't belong there. They've already prearranged what is an opportunity to engage the police department or the police precinct to come by and respond to what is someone that doesn't belong in their lobby or on their stoop, so that people feel safe, right? The opportunity to be able to work with our community leaders, block association, building what is a rapport and understanding. Public safety is not a one-way street. The police reform and conversations have disengaged. The opportunity to be able to come to the table and have conversations about what is impacting our communities has ceased. And we have to restore trust with our law enforcement and community. I see that happening when it's productive, it works. I had a by borough situation where we had a prostitution issue in our district. And I had to engage not only police, but it was police and the DA's office along with community from two different boroughs, and coordinating that so that on a monthly basis until we were able to determine what was the cause, the root cause of this. It turns out we had an elderly man who was a homeowner who didn't have family, who was able to open his doors for what would be the prostitutes to engage in his home. They had taken over the property, and we had to get in touch with the elderly person's family who lived in Florida to get what would be custodial over his well-being. We engaged with the judge to be able to grant what would be his care over to this family member, and the opportunity to be able to provide the social services necessary. No one would have ever known that this was happening. And so when we talk about what is police reform, does it reflect that? No, because we're not necessarily getting to the root causes of what is happening at the neighborhood level and engaging the appropriate authorities. This is not just about police. This is about police, prosecutor, judicial representative, and community. Everyone and everything that has to touch what is the police reform conversation has to be at the table.
Thank you, Diana. And as we run out of time, I'd love to just, we have one more question from CoDA member Deborah Scott Gonzalez. Diana, I live on the Lower East Side. Our streets are becoming Mardi Gras on the weekend in residential communities through noise, traffic. How do you feel about Governor Hochul's permanent takeout cocktail serve to go booze, which will affect bodega, liquor stores, etc.? How do you feel about this type of initiative?
Oh, I wish I had more time to like really get into this particular issue.
We take the short version.
Yeah, no, it's very complicated because I hear from the small business restaurant, they will take whatever will bring them business right now. There is a cause of desperation that's pushing policy like this, and that's not the answer. We're not seeing what is a local economy being built on cocktails to go. And so we have to take a step back to really address what is our local economy and the barriers, and address what is at stake here. Small businesses have invested millions of dollars to have their establishments built legally. And then we're going to say that this is okay because others are suffering. Perhaps we have to make sure that we are able to have what is a conversation around how do we stay open for business so that everyone is benefiting. These small businesses are not able to hire because they don't know if they're going to be shut down tomorrow. We have liquor stores that are now going to be finding themselves out of business, or perhaps increasing business, however you want to see it. But having a cocktail to go is not going to address improving our economy.
Thank you for that answer. And I think we will have to leave it there. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Diana, for that. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for the invitation, Joshua.
Of course, we're happy to have you. We know you have another event to get to, but thanks again for a few minutes tonight. We appreciate it. Have a good one.
Absolutely. Sorry about the noise in the back.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Okay, Sean, who do we got? The one other candidate? Okay.
Anna Zena.
Okay, thank you. I see she's connecting. Just give her a minute there. Hey, Anna Maria, can you hear us?
Hey, sorry. Hi, everyone.
Hello. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So let's just dive right in. We had like a 5-minute introduction, and then we have about 15 minutes for question and answer. And if you'd like to speak less at the beginning, take more questions, whatever you'd like to do, but we'll put 5 on the timer and take it away when you're ready.
Sounds good. Well, first of all, I'm so happy to be here with all of you. Thank you for making the time. I know that we had planned sort of a meeting later, so I appreciate folks sort of accelerating that. I feel very honored. So I'm María Archila. I am a child of the immigrant rights movement. I came to the United States when I was 17. And New York was the place that welcomed me. New York was the place where I found the safety to be queer and proud. New York is the place where my children were born. I have 2 kids, 9 and 6-year-olds. And New York is a place where I learned the beautiful power that is unleashed when people organize to fight for one another, when people organize to win dignity in the workplace, when young people organize for their dreams, when tenants organize to protect their homes. And I learned that by organizing inside immigrant communities. I started out back in 2001, teaching English and helping immigrant workers recover unpaid wages in the North Shore of Staten Island, in a community of day laborers. And it was this experience of being a young immigrant myself, but being in a community where other young immigrants were not living the life of young people. They were 15 and 16 and 17-year-old kids who were had crossed the border by themselves, who were sending money home, who were renting a bed and taking turns sleeping in that bed, and who were getting paid $3 an hour, working 10 and 12-hour days. But after these long days, they would come to these tiny little storefront where I taught, and they would say, all right, I'm ready to learn English, because for them, the sort of daily experience of exploitation didn't actually take away their aspirations, their dreams for themselves. And being in that community of day laborers, I think taught me the lesson that has carried me all the way through the last 20 years, which is that our dreams are a very powerful force. And what we dream for ourselves, what we aspire for our loved ones, is a really important force in our lives. But it gets so compressed by the pressures of wages that don't pay, rent that is too high, childcare that doesn't work. And all of these things are systems that are like the result of policies. So I've dedicated the last 20 years of my life to building organizations where working class immigrants, where Black and brown folks can be powerful together, so that we are taken seriously by those who govern, so that we can change the realities in our community. So I helped build Make the Road New York. I helped build then a national organization called the Center for Popular Democracy. And after 20 years of doing that, I decided to, throw my hat in the ring, because for the entire time, the governor's office has been a block to progress. It has been the thing we have to overcome to win protections for tenants, the thing we have to overcome to win the inclusion of immigrants in healthcare and unemployment insurance, and so many more issues. And, in a moment after the pandemic, when we saw how our communities endured so much, lost so much, and also contributed so much, it seems unacceptable to me that we just go back to a government that does, the business as usual of politics, that, give, $600 million to a billionaire to build a stadium upstate, and, at the same time try to roll back bail reform in the last 2 weeks of the budget negotiations. So I think that we, New Yorkers, are lucky to live in a state that has so much. We are not lacking money. We are lacking the commitment to focus on the issues of working class families. And I think we can change that by electing people like Jumani, who you already endorse, and so many of the people you have endorsed. And that's why I decided to, bring what I know from being a community organizer into the effort to make the governor's office not one that is an obstacle, but actually a partner to our communities. So, yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. That's great. Sorry, new puppy. Let's open it up for. Sorry. Let's open it up to questions. I know Anthony Feliciano, you have a question. If anyone else does, please just use the raise hand, and we'll go in order from there. But about 15 minutes of question and answer. Go ahead, please. State Committee person, Anthony Feliciano.
Hola, Ana. How you doing?
Hola, Anthony. Tanto tiempo.
Yeah, I know. For the many years I know you, I'm not going to ask you some obvious policy questions.
Okay.
But I do want to ask you, the lieutenant governor role is on the discretion of the governor, right? Many times in terms of what position they play at certain points of whatever, depending which governor. So it's been marginalized in many ways over many years. Maybe Mario Cuomo's time, there was a little bit more power there with lieutenant governor. But I'm wondering, in terms of what you've been asking of Jumani, and what if you're in that role as lieutenant governor, besides the state committees things and trial jury stuff and the vote that sometimes you have to break a tie, which is rare, where do you see as lieutenant governor expanding and strengthening that role so it addresses the things that you've been working on for many years?
Yeah, I think the lieutenant governor has been so underutilized, and I find it really confusing because it's actually an office that's elected by the people. So its power is derived from people, but it's used and has been sort of conceived as a surrogate of the governor, someone who represents the governor in like ribbon cutting ceremonies. And it doesn't have to be that way. I actually think that it is really important that the lieutenant governor operate as a check on the governor, as an office that is more devoted to connecting to communities that actually need government to work. So connecting to organizations like CoDA, connecting to organizations across the state that are elevating the issues that matter to people the most. And the reason why I think that's important is because the governor's office is encircled by like a very like thick fortress of lobbyists and real estate money and all these sort of intense pressures. And the lieutenant governor should actually operate a bit outside of that. I think it's important to have opportunities for partnership with the governor, but I don't think that it is an appropriate conception to just think that the power of the lieutenant governor is derived only from the assignment of the governor, although it has operated like that. The lieutenant governor has a role presiding over the Senate chamber, so usually used to break a tie, but actually I also think that you could use that role to say, today, 92,000 people slept in the shelter last night. What are we doing about that today? So using that role to sort of remind the Senate of the realities of New Yorkers. And the lieutenant governor also has a role presiding over the economic development councils. And I feel like that is also an opportunity to actually say these economic development councils should be devoted to addressing the housing crisis, addressing economic development that's rooted in people and not in, stadiums and sort of like that, these kinds of investments. So I think that there's a way to redefine it or use it differently. We have right now Brian Benjamin, who's actually inherited that role because the governor chose him. So his power really is derived from being, proximate to the governor. But you know what? That's why elections matter, because we can change that. We can create a different dynamic where there is a lieutenant governor that is elected by the people and responds and behaves like that. And I think that's important regardless of who the governor is, actually. If Jumani were to win, he actually was the one who sort of promoted this idea 4 years ago when he ran for lieutenant governor, that office should operate more like a public advocate. And I think that is true. There is a real life example that you can try to learn from and model from.
Thank you. Andrea Gordillo, CoDA co-president. Go ahead, please.
Hi, Ana Maria. Thank you for coming again. I have just a general question about, I appreciate your response about the role of the lieutenant governor, but I was wondering if you could speak more broadly about public safety and how you would approach that issue, since it's a hot topic right now, and how you would address the crisis of public safety.
So actually, I'm glad you asked this, because Jumani and I are releasing a public safety plan tomorrow. It's a 10-point plan that is actually devoted to the safety of people and not a plan that is sort of dedicated to the over-incarceration and aggressive policing of communities of color. So I think we are in a moment where people feel unsafe, and there is a rise in some types of violence, gun violence and intimate partner violence and other kinds of violence. And it is not surprising that we're seeing a rise of violence after 2 years of isolation and after 2 years of people losing the stability, and I think that the pandemic was disruptive for everyone, but for anyone who was hanging on to, the very basic sort of like edge of stability in their homes and lost their homes or lost their jobs or lost loved ones, stability went out the window. And with that, so went mental health, so went the ability to just like operate at a way that sort of allows you to be peaceful. So there is that sort of collective experience that we are going through. And I think violence is one of the expressions of social distress. And so we need to address violence with proven methods to de-escalate violence. There are many examples from the United States and across the world of violence intervention programs that sort of actually tackle the violence that is taking place in the streets and other types of violence. So our public safety plan proposes investment in efforts to support victims and survivors of violence, efforts to take guns off the streets, but most importantly, efforts to actually make people whole. We cannot ask a mother who is working 3 jobs to pay rent that keeps increasing to be sane. Her life is insane. She's leaving her children at home to take care of one another while she works multiple jobs to pay for rent. We need to actually make sure that that situation doesn't exist. We need to invest in housing that allows people to have dignified, safe housing, and also keep people in their homes. We need to make sure that there is childcare so that kids are not taking care of one another, but have actually safe environments where they can be cared for. We need to make sure that people have decent wages. Right now, we rely on women doing, working for poverty wages in childcare, in home care, in many of the care industries. And so these are the same women that are struggling to pay rent and leaving kids, to be cared by each other. So I think we need to invest in the things that keep people sane and keep people safe and whole. And we need to make sure that we are actually de-escalating violence. The efforts by the governor and the lieutenant governor to use what is a real crisis of lack of safety, perceived and real lack of safety, to I think their efforts to use that to roll back the progress that we fought so hard for on bail reform, on all the criminal justice reforms, I think is a dishonest engagement with the public. They wrote an op-ed where they said bail reform was not the reason why crime went up or violence went up, but we still want to roll it back anyway. So they don't buy their own arguments, and they're trying to do it in the budget because they know that their efforts to change the bail reform laws, the raise the age laws, and the evidence disclosure laws that were won in 2019 would not pass a real legislative process. They're trying to circumvent any opportunity by the public to have a real engagement in this. And it is frankly morally bankrupt to do that in the budget, because what they are preventing from happening is investments in childcare, investments in healthcare, investments in housing. So they're holding back the things that would make people whole to win political points with conservative New Yorkers who have actually who are consuming, the media that is stoking fear, that is producing, sort of amplifying the sense of instability. So I start by saying, we all deserve to feel safe and be safe. In order to be safe, we actually need to be whole. And in order to feel safe, we actually need to address violence where violence exists and address it with the things that de-escalate violence and not produce more confrontations and criminalization.
Thank you for that very comprehensive answer. We appreciate it. About 5 minutes left. Love to get through these 2 more questions at least. Deborah, go ahead, please, and then Allison.
It's a quick question. Hi.
Hi.
I live on the Lower East Side, and I know that a lot of people are in crisis now because of the court, but the courts are opening back up, but there's not a lot of lawyers to help out with the people who are being threatened to be evicted. How can we get more help to them or more lawyers to help these people?
Yeah, when I was at Make the Road, one of the things that I learned was that, when people were facing eviction, if folks didn't have a lawyer, their ability to win their cases was really challenging. And in New York City, there has been investment in representation, but not at the state level. And these should be a priority. We are going to have a wave of evictions, and the state should invest dollars in representation in housing court. It should be one of the priorities. And as you say, we don't have enough, not even in New York, where there is a publicly funded program. So these should be a priority that I don't think is actually included in the budget right now.
Thank you. Allison Greenfield, go ahead, please.
Hi, thank you so much
Hi.
for being with us.
Thank you.
I have a question about about ethics. As you know, one of the roles of Lieutenant Governor is to make appointments to the Joint Commission on Public Ethics. I know Governor Hochul has proposed a new plan to replace the commission. I would like to know your thoughts on that generally.
I mean, the Joint Commission on Public Ethics has not been super effective, partly because it is, you know, appointed by the governor's office, which, as we remember, as we know from the experience with Cuomo, often plagued with ethical violations and misconduct. So we need a more independent body. We need a body where people don't feel like they are, you know, they owe their role to the very person they need to, you know, supervise or be able to hold accountable. So that's a basic role that I think needs to change, or a basic sort of structure of ethics reform that needs to change. In addition to, actually, you know, we need to change the ways that campaigns are financed. The fact that, you know, what we're seeing right now with Brian Benjamin in the news on violations of campaign finance laws, I think speak to a real weakness in our democracy, which is that people with money, real estate, Wall Street, pharma, gas and oil have an outsized influence and achieve that influence through massive donations. And they go through to great lengths to exert that influence. You know, the news about Brian Benjamin is that one of his donors was sort of like gathering, you know, actually using his money, but pretending that it was coming from a bunch of other people, including a 2-year-old. To, you know, so he worked very hard to be able to give Brian Benjamin money so that he could have influence over Brian Benjamin. That should tell us something about how broken the system is and how important it is to actually remove the influence of money from our politics. And so that's, I think, a core, you know, it's a core set of reforms that we need to try to accomplish in order to have a democracy that is healthier, that can be actually more accountable to people, that can prioritize the interests of regular New Yorkers and not just the you know, the ones that are already wealthy, that are already influential, that already have so much power and comfort, actually. Yeah.
Thank you. A little less than a minute here. If there's anything else you'd like to add that you weren't able to get to, we'd love to hear it. If you've covered so much, but if there's anything else, we'd love to hear it.
I mean, I would say that I came into this with the desire to create tension from the left. I felt really worried about an election where the only tension was coming, or the like strongest pull was, you know, the New York Post and Suozzi. I think that when that happens, when the politics of the center right take hold, our communities lose. We lose momentum, we lose gains that we have made, and ultimately our communities are less safe. So I am hoping to contribute my own energy, my experience as an organizer, to create an environment where our people don't lose. We are the protagonists of the future of New York. And I think it's a future that's entirely possible if we have people who govern, who are focused on the things that are essential for regular New Yorkers. So that is my intention. And I am hoping every day that by partnering with folks like you all, that we make that more possible.
Well, thank you so much for your time and for all your comments today. We so appreciate you being here.
Thank you all so much. Have a good night.
Have a good night.
Bye.
Okay. So that concludes